Hey there, neighbor. Video games are awesome, aren't they? But what we tend to forget is that video games can only be as awesome as the systems they run on. Technical or programming limitations can severely curtail a developer's ability to make great games. Just ask anyone who owned a Philips CDI. But if success is determined by how many great games came out for a particular game console, then the best video game system of all time has got to be the Sony PlayStation. The PlayStation is my favorite game console ever, so naturally I'm going to have a lot to say about it. Strap in, kiddies. Papa's going to drop some knowledge. The PlayStation was originally developed as an add-on to Nintendo's wildly popular Super Nintendo, way back in 1991. Fortunately for the gaming world, Nintendo remembered that they were pure evil at the last moment, and snuck around Sony's back to conclude a partnership with Philips instead. I say fortunately because A, it's entirely possible that the PlayStation wouldn't exist if they hadn't, and we could have wound up with some SNES CD add-on thing, and we all know how well that the CD add-ons went over. And B, Nintendo's arrangement with Philips led to the most laughably bad Nintendo licensed games in history. All this meant that now Sony had millions put into R&D on a CD-based game system that was no longer going to be released. Somebody at Sony, who was either a genius or incredibly pissed off, or both, said, "Screw it, we'll make our own game console, and we'll show Nintendo you don't mess with the best." It's presumably at this point where the 80s power ballad would kick in, and the scrappy underdog Sony would repeatedly fail at making a successful system, only to put forth their best effort at the video game console making championships and win by a landslide. And boy did they ever!
You're the best around. Nothing's gonna ever keep you down. You're the best around. Nothing's gonna ever keep you down. You're the best.
But why did the PlayStation win so hard? The games, of course. Quick, how many classic games originally came out for the N64? Just off the top of your head. Giving myself 10 seconds, I thought of 5. Now do the same thing for the PlayStation. In the same 10 seconds, I came up with 12, many of which are still icons of gaming today, though admittedly some of them have gone downhill since then. I don't even know where to start. I mean, there's just so damn many great games. I guess I'm just going to show you some at random. The PlayStation had the CD format, which meant they could store an awful lot of data. But fortunately, the FMV craze was already on the way out, so not a lot of PlayStation games used it, though there were some hilariously noteworthy exceptions.
Commander, intelligence can't find anything on this Creel guy.
Creel's army can appear out of nowhere, set up installations, and vanish. No one knows how or why.
To be fair, Warhawk was an actual game that just had full motion video cutscenes. You know, instead of a game made completely out of cutscenes. That's right, I'm looking at you, Fox Hunt. Even though I wish I weren't.
Now that's a knife.
When the PlayStation first came out, most games were going 3D, even though it still looked like complete crap. But a lot of great games cheated, so to speak, by using 3D characters in front of 2D backgrounds. When it came to Castlevania, Konami chose to largely ignore 3D and instead make one of the best two-dimensional games ever made. That's not to bash Konami's 3D skills. They would later go on to make a game almost entirely out of 3D that would wind up being one of the scariest games ever made. Of course, Silent Hill might never have been made if it weren't for Capcom popularizing the survival horror genre with Resident Evil, and then attempting to milk that to death like it does with all its properties. And since there's this giant elephant in the room, I'll add that Square would most certainly not be left out of the fun. They went on to make arguably the most loved RPG ever, Final Fantasy VII. And while they did milk that cash cow, they also took the opportunity to experiment, resulting in some of my favorite games for the system. And one of the worst. Sorry, Square fanboys, but Ehrgeiz is terrible. I wouldn't even wipe my ass with it. Largely because, ow! Skateboarding fans rejoiced when a good skateboarding game was finally released. And breast fans rejoiced when Tomb Raider's designers realized that bigger is better. I could literally go on for hours. There are just so many good games for the system. There's some phenomenally bad ones too, don't worry, we'll get to those. But what I remember most about the PlayStation is the ridiculous amount of innovation. Game developers had become a lot like college students. They were willing to try anything. Badass female protagonists started becoming popular. The Tekken series practically defined 3D fighting that was easy to pick up and play, yet difficult to master. Role-playing games were no longer exclusively held in a medieval-type setting. Hell, we got RPGs about everything, from modern high school kids fighting demons, to martial arts masters fighting in giant robots, to nomads in the Wild West armed with guns and bazookas. For the love of God, there is a game that is half RPG, half dating simulator.
What the hell are you doing at a time like this? The enemy is closing in on us.
That's exactly why I'm with this pretty woman. I'm making a stronger sword.
Yeah, pretty women make my sword stronger too. The whole game is one long penis joke. Not a joke about long penises, but a long joke about penises. Can I start over? The PlayStation isn't responsible for the invention of the survival horror or strategy RPG genres, but they had been niche genres until then. The PlayStation saw an explosion in popularity for both of these genres, and as a result, we saw a lot of games for both genres that tried new and interesting things. As a matter of fact, there's a game called Kudelka that was a survival horror strategy RPG hybrid, and while it wasn't great, it is still one of the most unique games I have ever played. And of course, love it or hate it, you cannot deny the effect on the gaming industry caused by Metal Gear Solid. But I'm not gonna say too much about this one. Metal Gear Solid deserves an episode of its own, or possibly two. The PlayStation is responsible for a boatload of some of my favorite gaming memories ever. I just wish they had the same kind of innovation nowadays. Well, I'm gonna go and make some more memories.
We tracked it to a cloaked transport over the Pacific.
Transport? Now, why is that the last thing I wanted to hear?
It's not good. It's not good at all.
The PlayStation isn't responsible for the invention of the survival horror or strategy RPG. Wow, I went French.